Hi, it's 6:30 in the morning and I haven't slept because sometimes I'll go through a whole night without sleeping. So it's just a kind of insomnia and nervous energy, and I sometimes like to read in the late hours and the early hours of the morning. So um, yeah, I've not had any sleep, but I don't feel any worse for it. So what I want to talk about today is the visual arts, really, and just briefly, in maybe about 5 minutes. And I'm really torn between the Italian Renaissance and the Spanish Baroque, and I'm talking more about sacred art here because I always find the spiritual in the arts generally. I find the spirituals to be much more um, affecting than the secular. I find the spiritual to be much more intense and more alive in a way, and I can relate to it more, and it has much more depth of meaning and symbolism than the secular. So really, in terms of sacred art, I love Raphael first and foremost, really. Raphael is my favourite painter, and I'm currently exploring his works, many of them sacred, of course. He does some wonderful Madonnas, and he does some crucifixion pieces, and I'm still exploring his work, so I don't know too much about him at the moment in depth, but from what I've seen, he's my favourite painter, and I've also been to the Vatican museums in Rome, and I've seen some of his work there live. So yeah, I just love his clarity of style, and it's really it's a very bright style. There's no light and shade sort of thing. It's very bright and luminescent, and it's just transcendent in a way, and very beautiful as well, and just a sense of utter transcendence in his works, in his spiritual works, and Giotto as well. I like Giotto, although I've got a large book on Giotto as well, which I haven't opened yet, but I'm going to explore his work in detail. But just from the few pieces I've seen, Giotto is definitely up there with some of my favourite artists, and Fra Angelico as well. This is in terms of the Italian Renaissance, or really late Gothic, early Renaissance in terms of Giotto. But yeah, Fra Angelico is utterly beautiful, probably second only to Raphael, and has a real depth of spirituality in his works, and more contemplative than Raphael. But Raphael is somehow has a greater mastery of form, in my opinion. But yeah, Fra Angelico is more contemplative. So that's in terms of the Italian Renaissance. Then we've got the Spanish Baroque, and obviously the first name that comes to mind is Velazquez, and Velazquez has done a famous crucifixion piece, and also the Coronation of the Virgin, which I have in my library. I bought it as a framed art print, in quite large scale framed art print, and it's great. Yeah, it's my favourite Velazquez, the Coronation of the Virgin, and it's great because it comprises the Trinity and Mary, and it's just such a wonderful piece. There's a serenity about it, and a serenity and quiet beauty about the figures, and great detail in the expressions, and the expressions of serenity really, and the wisdom in the Father's face, and serenity in the Virgin, and it's just wonderful. And then I suppose other sacred Baroque painters would include Murillo, who is excellent. He does some wonderful Virgin Marys. I don't think they necessarily be called. Yes, Madonnas. I think it's still called Madonnas, even though it's a later artistic period. I think it's still referred to as Madonnas, and he paints quite youthful Madonnas really, because that goes back to a Catholic symbolism about the Virgin Mary, that the youth is in her looks is supposed to express sort of eternity, and all the things, all the positive things we express with youth, like beauty and eternity, and all these things. And Murillo, I've actually got the header to my Twitter page is a Murillo Madonna, and so I think they're very good. And also Ribera as well. Now I'm on quite shaky ground with Ribera. I don't know much about him, but he did a wonderful Trinity, and quite an austere Trinity, similar to El Greco's Trinity, and Zabaran as well. And Zabaran is he's done some good works, but perhaps not as accomplished as Velazquez or Marilla. But yeah, the Spanish Baroque and Italian Renaissance, it has to be the latter. It has to be the Italian Renaissance that wins ultimately. But there's some awesome pieces in the Spanish Baroque, and I've just bought a book on Spanish sacred art in the 17th century, and it's talks about how the materialism, because it's also an essays on belief in relation to art as well, and how the sumptuous materialism of the Spanish Baroque was really symbolic of the interior life. And I found that a very interesting point to make, because often the Catholic Church is criticised for being too high, too high church, and criticised in Protestant circles anyway, and that it's all fine materials, and in like the mass and in churches it's all very grandiose, or it used to be, perhaps a little toned down now. But yeah, this is something that really is meant to symbolise the depth of the interior life, and I I look forward to reading about that, how it accomplishes that. So yeah, that's Italian and Spanish art really. The Spanish, Spain didn't have much of a Renaissance in art, in visual art. It's like Juanes and Morales, but obviously in music they had Victoria, who was very important, but didn't have much of a Renaissance in art compared to the Italians anyway. And I don't know much about French art actually, I've not studied that, but apart from the impressionists, but obviously that gets into secularism. I'd say that the impressionists are some of the most beautiful secular pieces, the landscapes and the portraits of the impressionists. Like Renoir and Monet are my favourite, but yeah, I just thought I'd give that talk on art. It actually ran over a lot longer than I expected it to. I'm on 11.5 minutes here, so I'll probably end at this point, and I'll just conclude by saying I hope to study the visual arts in a lot more detail. I'm still quite rusty on certain aspects of it, but I'm hoping to improve my knowledge, and I'm going to certainly research Raphael and Giotto in more detail, as I've got specific books on them. And yes, I also ordered, just last night I ordered a book on Florentine art, and as I mentioned previously, the one on Spanish sacred art. So got a lot of research ahead of me, so hopefully I can give an update at some point with more details. Okay, thank you.